So real quick before the video starts, if you guys enjoy it, remember to leave a like. If you want to see more like it, remember to subscribe. I will be making a lot more reincarnation content. There's a lot of other stuff to cover. There's a lot of things to talk about, a lot of videos to be made. So if you're interested in seeing them when they go up, remember to subscribe, notifications, all that good stuff so you can see the videos. Anyway, today we're going to be talking about all of the new fusion items that were added with Reincarnation. There's quite a few, so I'm going to try and be brief with my explanations, but before I get into them, I do want to mention that some of the old fusion items did get buffed up a little bit. With this update, fusions are now considered a higher tier than Evos, and that means some of the old stats of fusions were changed and buffed up to match some of the newer ones. So some of the old fusions that you might have overlooked or thought weren't really worth it, maybe they're worth it now. Maybe they're a little bit better and you can maybe change up your setup and replace some stuff. Just something I wanted to mention. Let's get into all of the new fusions. Starting off with the Ambrosia Garden. This thing is a fusion between the Ambrosia Fountain and the Sakura Garden. Takes 3 Ambrosias, 6 Sakuras, so it's a little bit expensive on the Sakura side. But it does have, honestly, a pretty solid multiplier to it. Cores that have been around for a minute or less get a 10k multiplier. Anything from 1 to 5 minutes gets a 13k multiplier. Anything from 5 to 9 minutes gets a 19k multiplier. And anything 10 minutes and above gets a 25,000 multiplier. It does lose multiplier for every ore that processes, so that is something to take into account, but I would say this thing is actually a very solid furnace. Now, it depends on when you get it in the game, and it does have the Sakura Garden downside of losing multiplier, but if you can get it relatively early, this thing can be pretty powerful for you. Next up, the Anguished Garden. This is a fusion between the Dreamer's Anguish and the Sakura's Garden, and I gotta say, I really like the look of this one. I like the red sand, I like the aesthetic of it, I think it's a pretty cool one. Stats-wise, though, unfortunately, this thing is a little bit on the weaker side. It has a base 5k multiplier, loses 2 multiplier for every ore process, loses 4 multiplier for flaming ores that process. And apparently it doesn't have any stats of the Anguish, which I'm a little bit confused by. Maybe this thing hasn't been fully tested or we haven't fully understood the stats of it, but as of right now, the way I understand this item, it is not very good. That may change. Maybe check out the comments. If we learn more about it, I'll leave a pinned comment having updated stats and all that, but as of right now, I really can't recommend going for this thing, especially with its price. It takes 10 Sakura Gardens and 5 Dreamer's Anguishes to get, so it's a very expensive item to craft. And the multiplier really doesn't justify the cost. I don't think this thing is worth going for. Next up, the Anguished Guardian of the Gate, which, as you may guess, is a fusion of the Dreamer's Anguish and the Guardian of the Gate. Takes 4 Anguishes and 8 Guardians. And this one has similar stats to the Anguish in that it processes the higher value ores at a better multiplier. Anything below 100 sextillion will be 400 times. Anything from 100 sextillion to 100 septillion will be 800 times. From 100 septillion to 100 octillion, it'll be 1600. 100 octillion to 100 nonillion will be 3200, and anything above 100 nonillion will be 6400 times. And if you're off your base, it gives an extra 4 times multiplier. This thing seems alright. I don't know if it's really worth going for, but the multiplier is decent. If you're able to be off your base and you really need the multiplier as well, this thing can be pretty solid. It is a bit expensive with 4 Anguishes, but still not a bad choice. Next up, we got the Fire Crystallized System, and I really like the description for this one. This is a fusion between the Crystallized System and the Fire Crystal Mine. Takes 4 Fire Crystal Mines, 8 Crystallized Systems, and this thing is an industrial upgrader. To power it through here, it takes a coal to power it for 1 second, but when it's powered, it does a 12.7 times multiplier, and it's smaller than the Evo as well, so this thing, I would say, is a pretty solid upgrader. Powering it with coal is not a big ask, it's pretty easy, and the multiplier is pretty good. This is a pretty simple one. Pretty easy to get, and definitely worthwhile. Next up, on the not-so-simple side, we've got the Illuminator Evaluator. This thing has a few different effects. It works similar to a Schrodinger in that it has a 45% chance to do a 3 times multiplier, has a 25% chance to just destroy your ores, can do a 12 times multiplier, a 66 times multiplier, a times 6 multiplier, can add 6.66 trillion, set the value to negative 66.6k, or it just creates an explosion. It takes 8 Flaming Schrodingers and 4 Ore Illuminators to craft. And it also takes 40 minutes for the ores to educate. That's a long time. That is an extremely long time. And that is such a ridiculously long time alone that I don't think you can justify using this thing under almost any circumstance, unless it's with the Void Drive. Because having to wait 40 minutes for your ores to educate is an absurd amount of time. So this thing probably not worth it in most cases. You're probably better off using some other alternative or just a safer upgrader. The Nature's Temple is next, and this is a fusion between the Nature's Grip and Ancient Temple. This one is a little bit more on the simple side. Takes 10 grips and 5 ancients. And this thing is pretty simple. If the ore value is a whole number, it multiplies by 30 trillion times. If the ore value is a decimal, it's 50 quadrillion times. Now, early game, I could see this thing being pretty useful. It's a little bit easier to craft, not requiring all that much. And it has the potential for a pretty solid multiplier, so this thing I could see being potentially quite useful. Outside of the early game, not so much, but in the early game, definitely has some potential as an item. Next up, we've got one of the best fusions, which is the Pizza List. This thing is a fusion between the Pizza Blaster and the Catalyst. Take 6 Catalysts, 3 Pizza Blasters, and this thing is a really good upgrader. It's only 5 units long, super small, and it does a multiplier of 59.7 times. You heard that right, this thing in such a small space is almost a 60 multiplier. This thing is a no-brainer. It's super easy to get, it's super powerful. I honestly wouldn't be surprised to see this thing get a nerf because it's really good. This one is just get it, it's juice. Moving on, we have the Unitonium Mine. As you may guess, this is a fusion between Unium and Newtonium. Takes 3 Unium mines, 6 Newtonium mines, and this thing is a pretty solid mine as well. Has a pretty good drop rate. The ore value is 1 quadrillion, which for the point you can get this is very strong. It's a very easy craft, only taking Newtonium and Unium. Has a 1.5 time buff to radioactive upgraders because of the Newtonium, and it has a 2 times cannon buff because of the Unium. Now, the special effects don't seem too particularly useful. The main thing is that it's just an easy craft and has very high ore value. The benefits can be quite nice as well, but this thing is just a pretty solid early game mine, I think. Outside of that, not really particularly useful at all, but I do see it being pretty potent in the early game if you're able to get your hands on it. Next up, we have the Ore Nova, which is an advanced fusion that combines the Nova Star with the Stardust Pulsar. Takes 6 Stardust Pulsars and 3 Ore Novas, so this thing is a pretty expensive craft. It's gonna take you a long time to get those 6 Stardust Pulsars. And this thing simply gives all of your ores the Nova effect, makes all stars 4 times better, and this thing has the benefit of not having a time limit. And if you use it in conjunction with the Gargantium mine, you don't need to keep pressing it. All ores that come from the Garg mine will just have the Nova effect. Now, my main issue with this thing is that it conflicts with the Nebula system. If you're someone who uses the Nebula set like I am, this thing can be a little bit tedious to use. Now, if you don't have the Nebula set or you don't use it, this thing can be very potent. For me personally, though, I'm not really going to get much use out of it, and it's also a very expensive craft. Needing 6 Stardust Pulsars is a little bit mean. It's a little bit much. It is a powerful upgrader though, it just isn't very useful for me. I can recommend going for this though if you don't have the Nebula set. Next up, the Igneous Lightning, which is another very powerful fusion. This thing is one of the best, definitely. This thing fuses the Igneous Forge and the Arcane Lightning, takes 3 Igneous and 6 Arcanes. Now it takes the Igneous trait of needing constant coal to power it, but if you're able to supply with that coal and it gets to its max multiplier, this will be a 121 times multiplier. And I don't think I need to tell you twice how strong of a multiplier that is. This thing is another no-brainer. If you're able to get it, get it. It's really powerful. Definitely one of the best new fusions added. Definitely worth going for and using. Next up, we've got a set of items, the Phase Cursor Mine and the Phase Cursor Furnace. The Phase Cursor Mine is a fusion between the Precursor Mine and the Phase Refiner. Takes 3 refiners and 6 precursors. And the Phase Cursor Furnace is a fusion between the Precursor Furnace and the Phase Processor. Takes 4 processors and 8 precursor furnaces. The mine has 900 trillion ore value and is required to power the furnace. And the furnace, I was actually a little bit confused by it when I was trying to test it and looking at the stats. It starts with a 1k base multiplier. And if you use the Phase Cursor Mine in conjunction with the Phase Refiner, it will power this thing up, but the multiplier doesn't actually change. It stays at 1000. So I'm not sure if this thing hasn't had enough testing yet, or if it's broken or what. But as of right now, the highest you can get out of this thing that we know of is 1000. Which, given its asking price, really isn't that good, and especially compared to other items in the game. The mine really isn't anything special either. The 900 trillion ore value can be easily beaten by way cheaper mines. So this as a set is not very good right now. If we learn how it actually works, or if it gets updated to be fixed or whatever, then it might be worth going for. Again, check pinned comments. If anything changes, I'll leave a comment. That being said, now we have the Stardust Illuminator. This thing has a global multiplier to all ores on your base of 66 times, so it can be pretty powerful in that regard, but it takes 28 to 32 seconds for ores to educate. So in most circumstances, I really can't recommend using this item just because of the time it takes. It really isn't worth the multiplier. Unless, of course, you're just going for scent or something and you're trying to get the highest multiplier possible. This thing could be good then, but in that regard, I don't see this thing being too useful. It does have a benefit with the Gargantuan line, like all the Pulsars now do, and this thing buffs up the Gargantuan so that all education of Gargors is instant. So for the Illuminator and Indoctrinator, the ores will get upgraded instantly. I don't know if it works with the Illuminator Evaluator, but that can still be a pretty potent effect, especially if you don't have the Void Drive. It makes the Indoctrinator much more viable. So if you use Guard Mine with this thing, it can be pretty strong. Oh, and this thing is a fusion of the Stardust Pulsar and the Ore Illuminator, if that wasn't apparent. It takes 4 Stardust Pulsars and 2 Illuminators. Once again, pretty expensive on the Stardust front. It's kind of an expensive craft, so in that regard, I don't know if I can recommend it. If you're gonna go for one of them, I would personally say the Ore Nova is better, but this thing can still be kind of useful. Last up, the Virtual Gearwork. This is a fusion between the Virtual Enhancer and the Gravitational Gearwork. Takes 5 virtuals and 10 gravitationals. It has the hydraulic capabilities of the gravitational gearwork, and it has the effect of the virtual enhancer. Multiplies based on how far away the upgrader is from the mine, and it caps off at around 30 times. That is the maximum multiplier you're likely going to be seeing from this thing. And overall, I would say this thing isn't too bad. It looks pretty cool. I like the aesthetics of it, and the 30 multiplier is pretty decent. It is a little bit expensive with 5 virtuals, just because Advanced Reborns are a little bit rare now, but really shouldn't be too hard to get, and this thing is pretty solid. Now, I'm not sure if it's actually better than the Evos. This is the only one that I question if it's actually better, but it definitely is more space efficient, so if that's something you're worried about, then this thing will be better in that regard. So that is all of the new fusions that were added. A lot of them very strong, some of them on the weaker side, but overall, I really like what was done with fusions in this update. I love the ability to craft them. I think that's super cool, having to buy recipes with RP. It gives a purpose to an old mechanic in the game that was kind of forgotten about. I like how powerful they are as well. I really like some of these upgraders. A lot of them are very potent, and I like that it buffed up a few of the others retroactively as well. I'm really happy with the fusions overall in this update. I think that is one of the better parts of Reincarnation, honestly. Where the Superstitious miss, some other items make up for it. All of these... Oh wait, it's fine. Not trying to record or anything, no. Of course, the video is almost over, and then my Surge Protector has to barge in. Oh, hey, what's up? We're gonna come ruin your outro, ha ha ha. Alright, well now that my Surge Protector is done, I forget what I was saying, so I'm just gonna wrap things up right here. Thank you everyone for watching this video. I hope you found it useful. Hope you learned something new. Hope you got something interesting out of it. Thank you as well for the support on yesterday's video. It's doing even better than how to get superstitious items, so thank you for the support. It's been incredible during Reincarnation. I'm honestly just super thankful for everyone watching and sticking around. I'm not gonna gush too hard though. Thank you for watching. I'm gonna head out now. Peace.